Hey Mel, this is your video to assemble the scope. When you get the crate, it's going to be one big crate. I'm going to take pictures of that as I build it, so what I'm about to say will make more sense to you. But what you want to do, you're going to need a number 2 Phillips adapter and a drill. The whole entire crate will be screwed together. You want to remove the top of the crate first, and then in the top you'll see truss poles, podium, and most of the long stuff. They'll either be strapped in or screwed in somehow. Again, I'll show you in the pictures. You want to remove that. Then there'll be cross members that hold the mirror box and mirror and upper tube assembly down. You want to remove those. Those will be screwed into the ends. Take those out. Then you want to remove the ends of the crate and then the sides, and that'll expose everything that's inside. Basically, you'll have the mirror box, rocker box assembly all together. Next to it, you'll have the wheels and handles, which will be apart, and you'll have the mirror in its box, and then the upper tube assembly put in foam that'll be on top of that. So you want to remove all of that. Then you want to put your wheels on their axles with 2 nuts. Show that in a little bit. Put them in the scope. Put the handles in the back. You want to figure out how to roll the scope off the crate. You can use, like you need a little ramp just to ramp it down. Get it on the ground like this, and that's where we're going to begin the video right now. Okay, so the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to install the primary mirror. Everything inside the mirror box is pretty much set. You don't have to touch anything. Unpack the mirror from its box. Get the mirror out. You're going to see some blue latex gloves in there. Always handle the mirror with gloves when you're putting it in so you don't get any fingerprints on the coating. I highly recommend that you do this with 2 people. Mirror weighs about 55 pounds. And it's not the weight, it's a little bit of an awkward piece, and you want to make sure you drop it straight in. So what we have to do here, this is your mirror box cover, and you can see this octagon plate. If you see right here, there is a little mark. This indicates the front. So when you put this back in, you want this to the front of the scope. The front of the scope is where the tip of the altitude bearings are high. So the first thing I have to do is I have to remove these 4 screws. Again, number 2 Phillips. And just go ahead and loosen them all up to remove the top plate. Okay, so I've removed the top cover. You can see the mirror cell. The only thing you have to do here are these 4 clips. You want to turn them so they are out of the way of putting in the mirror, like that. Okay? So before you put the mirror in, I want you to just look in here and take notice of where everything is. You have your edge mount here, so you really don't have any placement for your hands in this area. You really want to be about right here. The opening here gives you plenty of room to get your hands in, nothing's tight. If you work with 2 people, you want to have the mirror like this, one on this side, one on that side, and drop it in. You could be in front of this one actually, so just like that. Okay? Okay, so I'm dropping in the mirror, nice and slow, straight down, right onto the cell. Then I take the mirror here, push it into the lower edge mount, and then I flip the clips back over the mirror like so. And that concludes your mirror installation. Now I'm putting the cover back on immediately. All right, note where I have my hands on the 45 positions because it's pretty tight here and here, so you want to hold the cover here when you drop it down. Again, the mark to the front of the scope. Okay, so I put the 4 screws back in. I'm putting the last one in now. Just screw them down, snug them up. Okay, if you notice, there are two other holes on the sides of each screw. That is for the mount I made to put the upper tube assembly down for transport. I don't even recommend putting these on unless you're actually going to transport the scope. You can leave them off, but when you put them on, they just screw on right there. You can put any one there, and then the front end will lock into these. All right, these are all the components that will be in the crate. You have your handles, your 4 truss tubes. These are the axles for the wheels. The wheels, you're going to screw these on. This is a 5/16 lock nut. They go on like this, and then you want to tighten the nut just up until there's no play like this. The wheel should spin freely, not tight. Okay. You got your tail rad, your Nexus podium, altitude encoder, your upper tube assembly, which is complete, your light shroud. These are pins for the wheels and handles and the Feather Touch hardware, various cables. This is your mirror spec, and the ServoCAT CD will be in there. This is the CD. Here are your 4 upper tube assembly transport brackets. Nexus DSC. This is the ServoCAT hand controller, and you're going to see a bunch of black rags in there. These are basically the cutoffs from the light shroud. This is the only material we'll ever use to clean the flat black. You will moisten them with clean water, and when you want to clean the flat black areas, you just wipe them lightly, no pressure, and let it air dry. That will be for all the flat black areas. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to install the altitude encoder. Don't forget about the flat spot on the shaft. We need to line that up with the set screw, and we're going to hand tighten it. At the bottom, you have a slotted end. That's going to go over this bolt. This is fixed. Do not touch it. Just simply slide it down into there. It's a little snug. Come over here. I'm going to make sure that I line up the flat spot on the encoder before I push it in. Push it in. Oh, we got the wires behind there. Make sure the wires aren't behind there. Again, line it up. Push it in. And then hand tight. That's it. Do not want to over tighten that. Okay? These wires complete the connection for your fans and your secondary dew heater. This male one will come around and plug in here, and this one will end up going to a truss there, but we're going to plug them in after we put the trusses on. These two will complete connections in the bottom. Next thing, I'm going to install the Nexus podium. That mounts to these 2 thumb screws, thumb bolts. I'm going to back them off, so I'm showing about 3/8, ½ inch of thread, something like that. Okay, these have slotted ends with recesses. Just simply slide it down, tighten these into the recesses. You want to get this pretty tight so that there's no play in it. Just like that. Now I can start putting my connections together. Right here, everything is pretty self-explanatory. It can only plug in one way. RJ45 in the middle, that's for the encoders. RJ11 at that end, that's your DSC hookup. This is male and female. This one's going to plug in here. The male from the altitude encoder arm is going to plug in here. And then the final connection will plug in here. You can see this is black and black. Goes together like that, and these will go under the bolts to hold them in place. Okay, the last connection over here is for the altitude encoder. This will be pushed in. You want to pull this out carefully. it can possibly snag on something inside. If it doesn't pull out all the way, just reach in there, see what it's hanging up on. Okay, this is going to go ahead and plug in to the bottom of the encoder like that, and then just push the excess back in so it's sitting tight to the scope. Next step, we're going to install all the trusses. So these 8 thumb bolts in the bottom are for the lower truss mounts. You want to back them all off so you're showing approximately 3/8 of an inch of threads. Okay. All right, what we want to do is we want to find the truss that has the wire in it. That's the one that's going to go first. This is going to go to the top of the scope, the podium side. You'll notice on the trusses, one is free and one is fixed. That's so when it's on, it keeps its proper angle. The plates always go to the outside like this. You'll notice on the bottom, they have recessed ends again. That's so the thumb bolts will lock into the truss. So we're going to start by putting this one on. See what happens when you don't leave enough thread. It hangs up, won't go down. So again, you want to make sure you have about 3/8 of an inch of thread. These, initially, you just want to snug up. You don't need to tighten them yet. Bring the other one in, and then we can go ahead and put on the other 3 trusses, making sure the top plate is to the outside and the recesses are going to lock into the thumb bolts. They can go in any order. All right, I have the 2 on. I'm putting the last one on, making sure my it's showing 3/8 of an inch. You can see here the end trusses fit inside of these recesses in the altitude bearing. Take care to put them in nice and slow so you don't scratch anything. You'll also notice that there are pads here on the scope to prevent any scratching. Okay, so this will finalize the last truss. Again, I just have them all snug. They're not fully tightened yet. You can come right over here now, and we can finish the wiring. Again, this one is going to come around, plug in to the RCA plug there. That is for the fans. This one is going to finalize the connection going up the truss. And then you're going to put the wire in there first, and then the other one in on top of it to hold everything in place. Okay, as the scope goes up and down, this will stretch, so this gives you the necessary length when the scope is all the way at horizon. That finalizes pretty much everything that's going to be done on the mirror box and your wiring. Okay, I'm going to get the ServoCap hand pad out of the box, and then I'm going to look in the bags, and I'm going to get this cord here, which is for the hand pad, plugs into the bottom of the hand pad. This velcros to the side of the podium like that, and then this goes into your last connection right here in the instrument panel. That installs the hand pad for the ServoCap. Okay, now I'm going to get the DSC, the Nexus. All right, you'll see those various charging plugs in there, and you have a quick start guide and the user's manual. Everything is pretty much done for you, but I do recommend reading this so you understand some of the more advanced features. I'm going to open up the Nexus. Again, I have this all set up for you. Okay, we're going to come over to the podium. The Nexus has keyhole slots. Put it on the 2 screws that I have up to mount the keyhole slots. You just got to find where it goes and drop it in. Okay, so then we have to do the connections again, pretty self-explanatory. The RJ45, the white one, goes into encoders. The other one goes into serial, and then this is your external power. All right, so right now we're just going to put the wheels and handles in. So again, the wheels are going to be separate from the axles. It's a 15/16 nut, okay? And you want to tighten these until there's a little bit of play left. You don't want to over tighten them. There should be a little bit of play here so the wheel spins freely. You don't want them to be tighter. It's harder to roll the scope. So the wheels and handles all install the same way. Just slide the wheels into the front of the scope, and then these clevis pins will go in. May have to lift up a little and lock the handle in. And as I explained to you before, the wheels can go on either side. This way, putting the wheel to the outside, giving you more stability to roll over terrain. And then on this side, putting the wheel on the inside to fit into narrow openings. Alright, so normally at this point, I have you put the light shroud on. However, what happens is the light shroud puts a little tension on the trusses, bringing them in, making it a little more difficult to put the upper tube assembly on. So while you're getting used to putting the scope together and taking it apart, I'm going to recommend that we install the upper tube assembly without the shroud and put the shroud on after. Alright, I'm 5'6", so this scope is a little bit of a stretch for me to get the upper tube assembly on flat-footed on the ground. However, I can do it. But I do recommend if you're maybe 5'7" or shorter to use a ladder. If you're 5'10" or whatever, you'll probably be okay with doing it without a ladder. So what I want to do, I want to undo my upper truss thumb bolts, showing about a ½ inch of threads minimum, because you need clearance, a little bit of wiggle room there. So now I want to grab, I set my ladder on the focuser side of the telescope, because this is the heaviest side of the upper tube. So now I want to firmly grab the upper tube. Okay, the focuser is going to be orientated like this, so I want to get the proper orientation. I'm going to carefully go up my ladder. Okay, and then what I'm going to do, I want to get that one in first. Then I'm going to get this one in, and then I'm holding it up like this. It won't go anywhere. Now I'm going to pull these out so they lock in, and it's just going to fall in place at the same time. Then I want to tighten the top first. That's the first one you want to tighten, because this way if the scope went over, this one's going to hold the front end from falling off. I want to push down here to make sure it's seated properly. Tighten this one. And then I could get off my ladder or whatever, walk around, again, pulling down to make sure it's seated, tighten, down, tighten. Okay, and then since we didn't know if this one was down, I'm going to loosen it, pull down, tighten. You can see this wire here. This is going to finalize the connection to the secondary dew heater. I want to plug that in. Big, huge rule. The last thing you do when assembling the scope is plug in the battery. You don't want any power hooked up to the scope while you're connecting power. You can short it out and blow fuses. Same goes for when you're dismantling the scope. First thing you want to do is disconnect the battery so you're not unplugging anything that's locked. Alright, so now that I got my front end on and these are tight, now I'm going to go back to my bottom ones, and I'm just going to tighten these all up. You don't have to wrench them home, just, get a good amount of tightness on them. With the recesses, they stay locked down, so you don't really have to worry about it too much. Just going to run over all of these. This just ensures, having them loose, that they all seat properly when you put the front end in. So now we got the scope basically fully assembled. I am going to disengage altitude. Okay, I want to disengage the altitude lever, so I'm just going to bring it back so it just settles halfway back. You don't want to push it all the way. The only reason why you would want to do this is if you wanted to disengage the cable. So I'm going to put it halfway so there's a little bit of tension on the cable. This will allow altitude to move. The scope is pretty well balanced right now. It's going to be a little top light because we don't have everything else on there. The next thing I want to do is now I'm going to put on my light shroud. I want to make sure my focuser is racked all the way in so I don't have anything protruding out. The light shroud, the drawstring goes to the front of the telescope, and the little hasp will be on the bottom here. The easiest way to do this, locate the top seam. So the drawstring will be on the bottom to the front, and then I'm going to pull the light shroud, keeping that top seam on my arm like this. And this way I can just go like this and then start pulling the light shroud up onto the front end evenly. What you want to do is you want to get it so that the bulk of it is past the focuser. Okay, so I'm continuing to pull it down. I want to get everything past the focuser. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and tighten the drawstring so that it won't pull past the slip. I'm going to stand the scope straight up. And then we're just going to continue to slowly pull the light shroud down so there's no wrinkles in it. Okay. Like that, and then you bring it down, it goes over the lifting handle. By the way, Mel, that's what these are. These are lifting handles. There's one in the front, one in the back. So if you want to pull the mirror box out of the rocker, you have nice handles to grab it with. The light shroud comes down like that. And get it all tucked in and tight. Now, during normal use of this, when you first take the scope out to cool, you would want to lift this light shroud up about a foot, take the mirror box cover off so any heat can evacuate the scope. Okay, so that is the light shroud on, and then the last thing we're going to do is install the tail rad, click, and snug up these two, and that pretty much concludes the assembly of the telescope. Alright, I went ahead and I installed the wheels and the handles in the back. I just want to show you moving the scope real quick. So I'm putting in the last one. You want to make sure the disengage lever is out of the way when you do that. Again, in the hole. Okay. Alright, so what's really important when you're moving the scope is you want to have the tube up at about 70 degrees. You never want to do it with the tube down. So obviously when you lift it up, this is going to come down more. So again, tube up about 70 degrees. You want to engage altitude to put a little stress on it from being able to fall down. And then really important is when you're going to pick up the scope, you want to make sure that one of the feet on the ground board is centered on the rear of the scope. The reason for that is there's 3 feet, so this way when you pick it up, it's tilting evenly on the front tube. If not, the scope will want to try and go crooked. So again, tube up at 70 degrees. I'm going to grab my handles and I can roll the scope. Now you're fine with moving the scope fully assembled as long as you're not going a long distance and as long as you're not going over rough terrain. If you're going a long distance and over rough terrain, I recommend breaking down the scope of the mirror box and just moving the mirror box and the rocker by itself. Alright, so I want to show you, this is kind of a maintenance thing, really important about this drive cable. So this is your altitude drive cable. that's connected to the disengage lever. Okay, again, when you're disengaging the scope to move it manually, you want to go that far. If I want to pull the cable off, I go all the way to give me clearance to pull the cable off. As you can see, with it all the way back, it's very loose. What can potentially happen here is this cable can overlap itself, which is a very bad thing. You want to make sure and double check that that does not happen. By keeping the lever only halfway and keeping a little tension, keeps it tight on the drive roller, and there's no possibility of it overlapping. So that's real important. In the event you have to remove the mirror box, you have to take the cable off, like so. Okay, and then it'll come up over. You'll see there's a rubber band where you can hook it from here to your altitude encoder screw, and what that does is it keeps it tight on the altitude bearing surface and lined up with the groove in the Teflon. Look right here, and you see the groove in the Teflon where the cable is in. You want to make sure that that cable stays on there. When I'm reinstalling the cable, I'm going to come over the top. I'm going to wrap it once, pull tight, wrap it a second time. You can see there how it overlapped. You want to make sure you take that overlap out so it's running flat on the roller. Bring it back up to the spring, hook it on, and then pull it. Very important, Mel. You don't want this cable to overlap itself. If it is, you will hear a grinding. You have to stop immediately, because if it's overlapped, it can start to cut some of the wire strands, which is not a good thing. Remember that. All right, so the rubber band will be in one of the zip bags. All right, so now this is only if you're going to remove the mirror box from the rocker. To do that, you have to take this whole altitude encoder assembly off and all the wiring disconnected, and you have to undo the cable. So when you undo the cable, put the rubber band through the loop, bring the rubber band through the rubber band loop, tighten it up, and then you just bring it up like this, and then you just hook it to this screw right here. So what that does, again, is it keeps this tight onto the surface of the altitude bearing, so it'll keep it in place with the groove when you remove the mirror box, so you can put it right back down. It's very important that the cable is not between the Teflon and the altitude bearing. That can again cause premature failure of the cable. Alright, so this lever here is the azimuth, engage and disengage. So this is disengaged all the way to the right. Okay, once you go to engage it, right about there is engaged, and I have it like that so that you still have clearance for the handle. But without the handle in, just go ahead and push it all the way over, and that will be engaged. So again, if you want to disengage it all the way over, if you want to engage it that way. All right, Mel, that concludes putting the scope together. Again, I'm 5'6", so I just want to give you an understanding of the size of the scope. Okay, it's a fairly big boy, so take care, especially when moving it. That's going to conclude part 1 of this video. I'm going to do a part 2, which is going to be getting the scope set up to do your 2-star alignment, collimation, and things like that. All right, so stop it.